start of it in old New York.
My name is Rebecca Costa, and I'm a sociobiologist by training. A lot of people don't necessarily know what a sociobiologist is. Another term for it is an evolutionary biologist, but I look at the evolutionary reasons that people behave the way they do in large groups, in societies, so to speak. Because my career from college led me to the beginnings of Silicon Valley, I became very interested in the pace at which technology was moving and the fact that it was accelerating. And so I realized that it was getting more and more practical to make predictions about accurate outcomes, whether it was weather or health outcomes or business outcomes, financial outcomes on Wall Street. And so I became very fascinated and interested in predictive analytics. And many people started putting a label futurist on me. I'm not sure what a futurist is. I suppose if you have 100 data points, it's not that hard to predict what 101 is. And because my predictions were fairly accurate based on very good computer models, people began to say, well, this is a person who knows what trends are coming and not only social trends, but also technological trends. And so I've had a career as a public speaker globally and won many countless awards and been fortunate to be published in all the major newspapers and magazines. And I've had just a very fortunate career, but I would say it was just by luck that a sociobiologist landed in what later became Silicon Valley. Sometimes, people try to describe their career as some linear, planned out event. And when you really peel back the layers, you find that there are some, serendipitous events that occur that nudge you and pull you in a certain direction. And I think that those events are in many ways far more important than whatever plans the person had or degrees or that kind of thing.
How does one wake up one day and decide that sociobiology, am I saying that right, as a field?
Well, it didn't really happen that way. I was getting ready to graduate. I was into my junior year and senior year, and a fellow by the name of Edward Wilson out of Harvard University, who's largely acknowledged as the greatest naturalist in the world. He's discovered more ant species and insect species than any other living individual. He happened to come out with a book called, Sociobiology. And a person who knew me very well handed me the book. It wasn't actually prescribed in any of my coursework. Handed me the book and said, you're just going to eat this up. And I did eat it up. Now, you have to understand that in those days, we didn't have hybrid degrees. They made you choose a lane. And so I had gone to the University of California and said, I'd really like to get a degree in sociobiology. And they said, well, one book doesn't a degree make, and we don't even know if that's a legitimate field. So we'll give you a degree in sociology and biology, which isn't really sociobiology, but that was the best they could do. So I wound up coming out with those degrees. Now, in those days, when you got out of college, it wasn't as though a job was waiting. So you went home and you lived with your parents and you started opening up the newspaper, and we didn't have the internet. So we were looking through the classified section for jobs, and the only jobs were in technology where we happened to live. And they were hiring anybody who could spell their own name because there was such a short labor shortage. So I got swept away in that and wound up making a terrific career out of it. I wound up forming my own startup and selling it in Silicon Valley. And that was very accidental as well.
When did the idea or the passion for creating predictive models, how did that come into your purview, I guess?
Well, in Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s, I was working with pioneers like Larry Ellison of Oracle and Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and Bob Noyce and all of these people who at the time, we have to understand, they did not know, and no one had a concept they were going to become legends They were just trying to make things and make things that worked. And they figured, and this is where all good ideas come from. If we made stuff that really worked and really made life more convenient and connected people and did a lot of things that we want technology to do, that people would buy it. It was really a leap of faith in those days. It wasn't as though, we could get out there and do these massive surveys and then, reverse engineer what we were making to what the consumer wanted. We weren't about that. In the early days in Silicon Valley, we were making things and then putting them out there and then hoping that they would be so revolutionary that you'd have to have a 2-digit IQ not to want to, do things in a different way. For me, predictive analytics was just an outcome of that, because technology was moving faster and faster and faster. We were quickly going from big computer, hermetically sealed rooms into a computer on your desk. So we were going from big IBM,
right,
cards to Wang, where we were putting in accounting information into kind of strange looking computers, and then to computers that were portable. And at the same time, the internet was coming into play, and network infrastructure. We were moving from enterprises to wireless. So there were all these convergences, never mind, the size of chips and the power of a chip. Just so many things were happening. It was a massive renaissance that was occurring. And to be in the middle of that, I could see it wasn't sustainable. It was not the rate at which we were inventing products and causing social change wasn't sustainable, because we weren't looking out to see what the effect of those technologies was. And let me give you a very specific example, so I'm not talking so theoretically. Right now, the government is really struggling with, what to do about information and voter manipulation. At this point. And so the whole thing with government and with leadership is you have to get out ahead and know what's coming so that you can make sense of it and you can protect consumers. I mean, think about it, all the wonderful things the internet has done, but there's always a dark side to progress in technology. Without the internet, we wouldn't have identity theft the way that we have it. Wouldn't have people conning old life savings, pretending to be the administration, and we have cyber warfare. These things, you have to prepare for them. So was, why aren't we looking at the law, and why isn't leadership acting to protect society against the negative potential uses of technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like the government often is tailing behind while the private sector is getting ahead, and the government's late
and
to.
The gap is getting larger. To your point, that gap is getting larger and larger because technology is accelerating its pace, and government is slowing down with gridlock and infighting. And the further that gap gets, the more in peril the average person on Main Street is, because there is no protection against the downside. When I talk about technology, I'm not just talking about, semiconductors and computing and the internet. Think about the first flight across the Atlantic Ocean, Charles Lindbergh. He was the recipient. I don't know if people know this. I wasn't alive then. I'm just studying history. I know people think I'm ancient and, did you know Charles Lindbergh? No, I wasn't alive.
I thought of Amelia Earhart at first when you said that, but I was like, oh no, she didn't make it.
Didn't make it. But Charles Lindbergh was the recipient of many, many peace prizes. Now that surprises people, but I tell them that it was thought that if you could fly and shuttle diplomats and leaders of nations to across the Atlantic, it would really broker a lot of peace. They could get together and it would avoid wars, and
Right.
it was really considered a breakthrough. Nobody at that time was considering that those planes would be used to drop bombs.
That's interesting. I never even thought about how it was first looked at when you could fly places.
Yes, it was really looked at as a major breakthrough because we could fly a president to meet with a king, which before that they had to get on a ship, and it was very, very burdensome and very difficult. So this was a major breakthrough. But think about what happened. The long tail was it was used for warfare. So in that way, whenever you look at technology, you have to look at the social consequences. And in order to deal with those social consequences, you must get out ahead of where that technology is headed and going. And we don't have leaders presently that know, I mean, they don't even understand what quantum computing is. You know, I mean,
Right.
if you use the word quantum in the Senate or the House right now, you know, people's eyes roll back in their head. They're just trying to get their arms around Facebook and Twitter, and it's just way too late. They ought to be looking at what's next.
Yeah, that was funny when they had Mark Zuckerberg and they were questioning him and they had no idea what to ask him. And he was like, you could just tell he was like so bored with their questions. It's so trivial.
Well, the questions are revealing, aren't they? They reveal a complete lack of knowledge on how Facebook and Twitter works. Facebook and Twitter are not the issue. Human behavior is the issue. But putting that aside,
that's a great line.
Yeah, that's not the issue. But we have to get out ahead of how humans use technology, and to be sure that we are not treating progress as though it's all good and there's no downside, because I believe that the role for the future leaders is to get out ahead of technology and science. This is the most important thing right now.
The role of technology and science is the most important things we could do to get. And in what way would, if we reshaped our thinking, or I guess it goes back to elections. If you start electing people that have come from or have at least an understanding of technology in Silicon Valley instead of
lawyers who are
lawyers.
fundamentally educated to argue. Think about it. Most of our government leaders have a law background, right? 90% of them are lawyers, and lawyers are trained to fight and argue and win. And that's what they do. And so, is it any surprise that's what our leaders are doing? They're fighting to win. They're right fighters. What we need is problem solvers. People who will get in and say, this is a really complex problem. It has many, many layers. Let's start to pull it apart and see what the mechanics of it are and what can be done, right, to protect people. Because the role of government where science and technology is concerned is to leverage the science and technology to protect the population, the general population. That's all government should be doing.
So you think they have a vast overreach of what they are doing right now?
I think that they're too far behind. They don't really understand the consequences. You can look at China right now. They're using facial recognition to be able to stop people who are potential terrorists and criminals. Well, we don't like that, right? Because this idea that it invades our privacy. There's a camera, and the camera's looking at analytics on our face. But here's the science. Let me explain the science. You have 53 muscles in your face, right? And how those 53 muscles operate reveals your intention. That's why poker players talk about a tell. They sit across and they go, yeah, when he does this, he scrapes his card, or he rubs his chin, or he blinks his eyes twice.
So how would you, if you saw somebody that was about to commit a crime and they had a camera that had facial recognition, how would would you be able to prevent the crime?
Well, this is a very good question. I have to keep reminding people that Tom Cruise's movie Minority Report's not a documentary. But in my, but in my
I
world,
haven't seen a lot of movies. Like the worst.
well, in that Tom Cruise
But
movie.
dystopians are typically my favorite.
I know, but you have to see it. You have to see it to understand.
Yes, ma'am.
There are people called the precognitive police, and it goes far into the future. I'm not a big fan of science fiction movies, but sometimes they're very good, and this one is good. It's called Minority Report, and they have precog police because our predictive analytics have gotten so precise that we're within 100%, we could predict a person is going to commit a crime based on all the real-time data that's coming into the police department on that individual. And we know what the crime is, where it's going to occur. And so the precog police come and seconds before you're ready to stab someone or rob a bank, they arrest you and you go in front of a precog judge and you're sentenced.
So real quick, how would they aggregate that data if I'm going to go do something wrong? Or let's say Jimbo is going to go do something wrong, because I don't want to say I'm going to do something wrong. And
we already know. Take Stephen Paddock. Do you remember who Stephen Paddock is? He was the Las Vegas shooter that shot into that concert and murdered
Luke Bryan, I think.
Concert goers in Vegas.
Yeah, 58 people killed, I think it was.
That's correct. All right, let's just take his case, right, which was pretty airtight. We know who did it. We know what he did. He was put on diazepam about 3 or 4 months before he committed the crime. His father was a arrested and permanently jailed dangerous sociopath. That is a heritable quality, right? So those people should never be put on diazepam. So we knew that had happened. We knew that his gambling habits had become irregular. We knew he sent his live-in wife, they weren't married, but they had been together for many decades, back to the Philippines with $100,000 and said, don't come back. We knew that he had been buying and stocking up on nighttime tracer rounds beforehand. We knew that he had booked several hotels where they were overlooking public events. Not just this hotel, but other hotels in other locations overlooking public events. We knew that he had moved 26 times in the past 5 years. That's a red flag. We had probably, he had a
million red flags. He made up like.
And if you took all those red flags together, you would know that a person was reaching criticality. But in the United States, and by the way, all of this was public information. We didn't need to get into anything private to know this.
Like warrants.
Right? But let's assume we got that public information. What would we do? In the United States, we believe that you can have a change of heart. We believe that he could have taken the guns into the hotel room, cracked that window, pointed his gun at the concert goers, and then, you know what? Pulled the gun back, sat down and said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put my guns away and go home. We believe that. But that's not usually the case. In almost all the cases, we know what's going to happen. We've seen that movie. We know all these red flags are aggregating and they're going to cause someone to commit a dangerous act. What we have to do now is come to terms with that. What does it mean? And how are we going to deal with that as a society when we know that it's 99.99999% someone is going to commit a dangerous act and victimize innocent people? We have to have that discussion now, because that is where we're heading. I'm going to give you a really simple idea of predictive analytics that blows people away. I can predict today with almost a 90% certainty that you're going to trip and fall in the next 3 weeks. How do I know that? Because we just recently discovered that your normal walking gait changes 3 to 4 centimeters. It's not even discernible by the human eye. But when that walking gait starts to change, you have a very high likelihood of slipping and falling. This is how good predictive analytics is right now.
I'm pretty coordinated, so I don't know if I'm going to slip and fall.
Yes, but what about your grandmother?
Well, I mean, she's not as, I don't know, maybe she'll trip and fall. I hope that doesn't happen. Let's see.
Don't you think this would be a great value to your grandmother? You know, many times the elderly.
How would you? So how do you? If you know that could happen, how do you remedy that?
Well, there's a
Is that like
number
the life
of
alert
right now that are developing a Fitbit for the elderly's legs, so that once their walking gait begins to change 3 or 4 centimeters, it'll ping their caretaker's phone, their phone. It'll say, "Hey, get off of uneven surfaces. Don't climb stairs. Get into physical therapy and repair your walking gait." We can avoid falls. Is that incredible?
It's pretty remarkable. If you think about it, it's really remarkable. If you could
Broken hands, broken legs. The elderly don't have to do that. Many times that causes them to lose their ability to live independently and have to go into assisted living, and that's the beginning of the end. Now, if we can do that, we could probably extend their ability to live independently, maybe 3 to 5 years by just avoiding falls. And we're at a point where we can. We have the knowledge and the technology. This is what I'm saying, whether it's heading off crime, whether it's education. Think about facial recognition in the class. In real time, a teacher standing in front of the class has no idea if the lesson that they just gave was actually learned by the students. They have to wait several weeks when they give those students a test. But imagine facial recognition on every student and a feedback monitor in the back saying, "Hey, you need to go back over that because only 10% of the kids in your class got that lesson. You may think you taught it right, but they didn't learn it." And we would know by facial recognition. So it gives them real-time feedback in terms of whether their students are learning or not. This is what I'm talking about, is that we can predict outcomes and then go to avoid negative outcomes very, very easily.
Yeah, that's education. That's a good example of how it could be used for something positive. Because
Exactly.
a lot of people will try to say at what point technology is going too far. I know I've spoken to people that are really concerned if they have like chips implanted in them, and if how invasive the government can really get. But when looking at how it could be used, especially in like healthcare, there's gonna be a point where you could be so much more physically, I don't know if fit's the right word, but like an artificial arm will be have more benefits to it than a human arm. I don't know, let's say. You could be stronger or whatever. How far away would you say we are from something like that, where people?
Well, you're getting into the territory of Ray Kurzweil, who talks about the man-machine meld, and that's already occurring. You look at soldiers that are coming back from war, and they're getting artificial limbs that are actually stronger and better than what they had before and indestructible. So we're already going through that. You think about heart transplants, you think about stents being put in the heart, right? You think about all of these artificial devices that we use. We're pretty used to that. We're not only pretty used to it physically, we're pretty used to it cognitively. If I tell you it's going to rain tomorrow, so you might want to cancel that picnic, and you walk into your house and you go, "Alexa, what's the weather report?" And Alexa tells you, "Oh, it's not going to rain for 48 hours, blah, blah, blah. This is what's happening." Who are you going to believe? Me, your neighbor, or Alexa? So we're becoming more dependent on machines, not just physiologically, but also just for knowledge and information. People trust Alexa more than they trust each other. This has been demonstrated in any number of studies. So we're beginning to make that transition already. Think about how much you trust this device here, this cell phone.
Yeah, every time somebody says something, I'm like, hold on, let me check this real quick.
Exactly. And who are you using to verify? You're using technology to verify what they said, right? So
It's technology, but a lot of it could come from people that have it's developed by people, so you're just trusting smarter people.
well, you're trusting smarter people, but you have to remember that the data becomes verified, cross-verified. I mean, you can put something ridiculous out there, and yes, some people are probably going to take the bait. But remember that these false claims, they get weeded out in the internet over time because there's so much. They get neutralized. They get neutralized by the truth. False claims get neutralized by the volume of truth and cross verification. So they don't last very long. I mean, the idea that, Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile trafficking ring out of a pizza shop in New Jersey or whatever that had a lifespan of like 4 hours, right? And then after a while, all the data comes in. She doesn't own any pizza factories, and what was the source of it, and so on and so forth. So you can sustain a lie for a very short amount of time, but the cross verification will bury it eventually. There's a kind of a democratic truth, if you will, to the internet.
Could there be a way that if there's, for whatever reason, there's a want or a benefit to going to, I don't know, let's just sort of an example of war with some country, and could the government potentially overreach and create programs that could have, everybody says there's independent fact checkers or whatever, but could there be a way where they could skew data or skew facts and have them presented in a way that would be able to alter public perception of wherever they would want to go to war?
They already do it. It's called spin.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I mean, what do you think spin is? Spin is taking data and manipulating it so you look good, right? I mean, and that's what every press conference is about, and it's what every campaign is about. It's just about spin, but that's been around for ages and ages. It's just that you have more data to choose from right now. What spin is really, here's the data, and I'm going to selectively pick data, select data that I want to present to you. Now I'm going to mush it together and make a story that sounds plausible and believable, but I'm going to leave out all the things that are inconvenient and make the story unreal. So that's all spin really is. We just have more data to choose from. So spin has gotten more sophisticated.
Do you, was there any candidate that was running in this election that you thought might be better equipped to handle the technology or technological surges that are taking place?
No.
What about Andrew Yang?
I liked Andrew Yang. Right?
I liked him too. I don't know if I like him as a president.
I think he would. Yeah. He's got the right ideas, right? But I just, you have to understand, he would have been plugged into a system where he would have been just completely ineffective. It would have been the Jimmy Carter situation where you had a very, very bright man with the right intentions, and he got plugged into a system where he was incapable of functioning. Andrew Yang wouldn't have been able to function, although I appreciate very much his logical approach.
He brought up a lot of things that people haven't really put on their radar.
And he was right. Look, he said, give everybody $2,000 and lift them up out of severe poverty. And what did we do? COVID hits us, and we gave everybody money. We gave them $1,500. We did exactly what Andrew Yang said to do.
And unemployment, we put on
another $600 a week or a month or whatever. Yeah. I mean, what Andrew Yang said happened because of COVID. Right. And he was absolutely right. The way you lift people out of poverty is you've got to give them a baseline, a functional baseline.
A lot of what about the handling that with the debt and everything? There's so much debt. It's just like comical.
We don't care about the debt.
Care. Right.
Nobody cares about the debt. Do you hear anybody talking about debt in the campaign right now? We're what, 65 days or 70 days out from reelecting a new president? Nobody mentions the debt. We're just printing money. We'll print money until it doesn't make any sense anymore. We'll go into hyperinflation, and that'll make our debt seem very small. By the way, the cure, right? The cure for debt is inflation. Because when money is worth less, your debt is smaller.
Yeah. But
so that's how debt's going to be handled in the United States. The debt is going to get very, very small because we'll have hyperinflation and it'll seem like nothing.
Yeah, that sounds like there'll be a bigger issue, though.
There will be a bigger issue, which is why Andrew Yang was right. You've got to create this floor, but there are bigger issues, but that's how you get rid of debt ultimately.
So what would you say to people? I'm only going to bring this up because it's an election now. People that are undecided between Biden and Trump, like how would you tell? Like what would you, for those that are to handle, like as the future as far as technology, is there one way that you're leaning at all?
If they're our future, we're in real trouble because
it's our future.
Yeah, that's not our future. Our future isn't politics.
Right.
It's science and technology. And if one
that's
thing,
a good count. I like that. That's a good.
And listen to this. If there's one thing we learned from COVID-19, it's that we don't want political leaders making science decisions.
Absolutely.
It's just really that simple. We either trust science and technology and people who are sociobiologists who are looking at the effect, the long tail effect that this has on societies, and then working with leaders to say, hey, it's not all good. Progress is never all good. It never historically has been all good. But let's look at it. The automobile was a great invention, but look what happened to the Earth's ecosphere. Right? We produced lots of cars. Mm-hmm. We got very mobile. Same with planes. They turned into bomb carriers. Same with the internet. We had, fraud and cyber warfare now. Same with antibiotics. They save your life, but they kill your microbiome and make you vulnerable to hundreds of other diseases. I mean, there's not an invention that doesn't have a dark side. We must rely on science to guide public policy. This has to happen. So, Biden or Trump, how'd they do in their science classes? Did they even take any science classes in college? No.
Well, Biden's been there for 30 years and Trump made a lot of money. So, well, anyway, I think there should be like some type of revamp to the whole political. We've had the system in place since the 1700s. Maybe it's time you look.
Third party. The answer to your question is we need a third party, and we need a younger generation to say enough already with this two-party system that has created a disastrous environment.
It's really bad.
And you know what? We've got to create a third party, and it has to grow momentum, and it has to reflect our values and our real future. Our real future, not some imaginary future that politicians are using spin and collect data.
If you think 78-year-old Biden, 77-year-old Bernie Sanders, and 78-year-old Mike Bloomberg,
they're not your future; they're your past.
Yeah, yelling "Get off my lawn" at each other. Those are the.
I'm 65 years old, and I'm saying
yeah,
they're not our future; they are our past. And the past will repeat itself with leaders like that. Meanwhile, the gap gets larger and larger between technology and managing our lives through digital data, through robotics, through predictive analytics. All of these things are what represents our future, not politics. Politics will die a natural death.
Okay. So yes, okay. I see what you're saying. You're saying not having to worry about who the politicians are at this point.
Doesn't matter who we elect. Won't make any difference. Won't make any difference in your daily life.
I agree with that. What's some predictions that you said you mentioned earlier that you made some predictions? What are some things that you were able to foresee?
Well, we just talked about some. We know that predictive analytics is going to be increasingly used by law enforcement to act more preventatively. We know that classrooms will now be able to have real-time feedback so that we don't have to wait 3 weeks and take a test and find out 50% of the class didn't understand a lesson you gave 3 weeks ago. Things are going to move to real-time data. More and more society is going to use real-time data to make decisions, and historic data is going to actually play a lesser and lesser role. We're finding this with COVID. The historic data that we had on other viruses wasn't nearly as useful as what's happening right now, because we needed to make decisions based on what was happening now, and we didn't have enough data, right? So this is something that we're going to see, is there's going to be far more emphasis on real-time decision making, real-time leadership, and real-time data.
How familiar are you with blockchain technology?
Very familiar.
Can you foresee something like cryptocurrency? I don't know about Bitcoin in particular, but any type of cryptocurrency that would use the blockchain technology as potentially a future currency that's widely used or adopted by society?
I believe that within your lifespan, maybe not within mine, but within your lifespan, I believe that we'll have a universal currency and there will not be individual nation currencies. I think that we had a little false attempt with the euro.
Right.
The euro was structured so that if one country went down, it was going to take all the countries down, and that's not what you want. What you want is a universally accepted, electronic currency. And I believe we will move toward that. We're certainly, what's happened with COVID is nobody's using paper currency and coins anymore because of contamination. And that's enough of a reason to get off of physical currency. And most of us, use a credit card or a debit card of some sort. Anyways, so we made a half step. We made a half step by using credit cards, and now the next full step will be a universal currency.
Do you think blockchain will have a part in that?
Yes, blockchain will have a part in that because it's an immutable. What blockchain creates, just for your listeners, is an immutable ledger, right? And you definitely need to have that.
You could see all the countries adopting that. I probably wouldn't even have to be all the countries. If people just start widely adopting it themselves, eventually the countries with the governments would have to, I assume.
Well, think about how we're operating right now. I mean, if you travel overseas, you can use your credit card, your Visa, your
it
MasterCard,
just
American
converts.
Express, right? But they have a different currency, but I don't need to know that. And the credit cards companies are sort of the half step because they've made that currency exchange invisible to us. And so I believe that to be the half step. I think as we go to more and more credit and debit transactions, that we're moving toward a universal currency anyways.
It seems like something that's inevitable.
Yes, it is inevitable. I think that's a good word for it. Yes, it's inevitable.
Something I read about you is that you are an expert on fast adaptation.
Yes, fast adaptation. Yes, I'm allegedly the global expert on fast adaptation in complex, high failure rate environments. That's a mouthful, but yeah, I remember telling my dad that. I said I'm the global expert in that, and he said, "Well, good luck with that." What kind of job can you get?
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, let's see. What's a high failure rate environment? We tend to treat 9/11, the subprime mortgage collapse, the sudden overnight collapse of a nation's currency, the housing. Well, let's see. The .com collapse, COVID-19. We treat these game-changing events, as though they're all really different and really special, but they all have common denominators. As a predictive model person, they all have common denominators. They're all very, very simple. And in reality, what happens is overnight, the complexity of the problems we must solve skyrocket, and the amount of real-time data that we have to solve the problem is going down. So you have this inverse relationship where the urgency and complexity is going up and the real-time data is going down, and the velocity of change is increasing. The opportunity for risks and failure are increasing. The variety of data sources are increasing. And then on the other hand, the idea that you can plan or look at long-term consequences of your actions are going down. So you become very reactive in an environment like that. And there are models for how to successfully adapt to a environment such as that. And we draw those models from nature. Nature is the longest living successful empirical example we have as human beings. And we have studied animals. 99.9% of all the species that have walked the earth aren't here anymore.
Another from a George Carlin skit.
Yeah, but we've been able to study those who have survived, and what kind of adaptive techniques did they use that allowed them to survive and in many cases thrive when the environment suddenly changed in a radical and hostile way. And we've been able to now transfer those principles. I just wrote a book a couple of years ago called On the Verge, and took those 12 principles that allow organizations and individuals to adapt very, very quickly and sometimes thrive in a sudden environmental change like that.
Adapt quickly and thrive. How would, if things are new, if it's something like the coronavirus, is something that's new that required fast amount of changing, fast adaptation, how do you use science for something that wasn't foreseen previously?
Well, I'll tell you how. So one of the lessons is any drive toward singularity is a drive toward extinction. So this is the reason you have lots and lots of types of fish and lots of types of birds and lots of types of ants, so that when the environment changes, some will be able to survive and others won't make it. They won't have what's required or can't adapt quickly enough. Now, when something like the coronavirus comes along and it's novel and we haven't experienced it before, what do? We have to diversify. We have to go after everything because we don't know what's going to work. So we give people $600 and we tell businesses we'll cover their salaries for 2 months. And we tell people to shelter at home, and we tell people to use hand sanitizer, wash your hands, wear a mask. We go after everything. We start a nationwide vaccine campaign. We start looking at convalescent therapy.
So it's kind of like taking a shotgun to a dartboard.
That's right. But now remember, that's what you do when you have no data, because you have no way to decide what's going to work. But remember now, empirical data is coming in real time, and you can weed things out. Like, for example, hydroxychloroquine. Well, we thought that might work, and we went, and I don't begrudge the president one bit for going down that path. But when it was shown that it wasn't really that effective, fine. We're also finding wiping down a bunch of surfaces incessantly isn't producing the result that we thought.
Yeah,
I mean, we're getting data. It's not that we were wrong. What people have to understand is we're not wrong.
Has
We're not wrong.
hydroxychloroquine been shown to not work now? I thought a study came out and they said it was if it's treated, if you use it early, it could be effective. I don't know. The thing is, it shouldn't be a political issue. It should just be a science issue. Does it work or not? But it's become like a political issue.
Can we just be honest here? Anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is a political issue.
I know. I know.
It doesn't matter if it's science. It doesn't matter if it's right. It doesn't matter if it's wrong. That's just the way. That's the world we live in right now. That's too bad. Because you throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I don't care about the politics. I don't care about the politicians. If what you're saying is inaccurate, then shut up.
Yeah.
If what you're saying is accurate, even if I don't like you, it's right. It can be proven to be right. So, but the world we live in right now, anything comes out of his mouth is political. I got to be careful about examples I use. If I use like any examples, somebody when I'm speaking to 5 or 10,000 people, somebody in the audience will say, "Oh, well, that just shows that she's a liberal or she's a Trump supporter." So you know what? The examples I use are from 5,000 years ago. I use 3 million. It's safe to talk about man's evolutionary journey. I could use examples.
The Black Plague. Yeah, that's part of, from my lifetime, I don't think things have ever been this divisive. People have been this divided.
Oh, it has been. Yeah, I'm 65. Believe me, this has been going on for a long time. It just, it's just a little more out in the open, and it's a little more crass and crude. That's all.
I think part of it too is there could be a very vocal minority on social media, and that could be blown up as if it's this giant case, this giant thing, when really it's just a couple.
Look at what we've done to Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx in the middle of a pandemic, right? When people are dying of this disease, we go after them as though they're some political pawn, and I'm just shaking my head, going, "Who in the world?"
They're skirting a line too, because they're becoming politicized when they're really not. They're
and you know what? If you want to help society and that's your ultimate goal, you're going to have to just go along and find a way to do that within the Trump administration and later in the Biden administration. These people are, they're trying to influence public policy through science, but we have to understand they don't have the final say. They can propose, they can provide data. Yeah, they're in an advisory capacity, and I see no benefit in going after them or any scientist who's trying to provide information. It's not up to them. And they're doing the best they can. And they're, as you say, they're walking a fine line.
I think part of it too is that the protests happened, and I don't know if Fauci said anything about it, but there's this belief that public health is saying that's okay when you have these mass gatherings of people, but like if there's a church gathering, like that's not okay, or voting in person is not going to be allowed, which I don't get. I don't see why you can't socially distance. For a lot of places have remained open. There are businesses that are running when they have masks on. Keep distance. Why can't you just space out voting over like a week or like some time instead of I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just trying to think.
I understand that the reality is there's only one proven way to knock the virus out, and that's for people not to transmit it to other people. There's nothing else that we have, by the way, that will work. But we do know that it gets transmitted from you to somebody else. So if you're in a position where you only have one thing that you can prove that works, you got to put all your beans in that basket. And that's all we have. We don't have anything. And by the way, this idea that we're going to have a vaccine that everybody's going to take, and
Well,
you know,
Russia has one. We could use Russia's vaccine, right?
well, I'm telling you that there isn't going to be a vaccine for many, many years. And if we get one, it might be 15 or 20% effective, which is the same as not effective at all. Look, 34 years ago when AIDS was breaking out and people thought if a mosquito bit a person with AIDS and bit me, I would get AIDS, because we didn't have any real-time data and we didn't have our arms around it. This is 36 years ago. The Secretary of Health and Human Services in the United States said, hey, we're going to go all out and get a vaccine to prevent AIDS. 36 years have gone by, we don't have a vaccine. Vaccines are not very good. They don't work very well. In all of the history of human societies, we've only eliminated one disease with a vaccine, that's smallpox. All the other diseases have not been eliminated. Vaccines do not have a good track record. I wish people knew more.
But see what you're saying and what a lot of public health officials are saying, it's different, because they're saying we need a vaccine, we're going to develop a vaccine. But if it's only been effective one time, then why even have flu shots, MMR? I thought rabies was.
Look. Here, I'm going to base it on empirical history. I don't like to make promises. I don't like to live in a fantasy world. It's just not my jam. I'm just telling you, based on history, 36 years later, with an all-out effort, we don't have an AIDS vaccine. Here's what we're good at. We're not good at keeping you from getting a disease. We can't keep you from getting cancer. We can't keep you from a cognitive decline, right, and getting Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
We can't keep you from getting things. But what we're really good at is keeping you from dying from it once you get it. So you don't have to die from AIDS anymore. You can die from something else, but you won't die of AIDS anymore because we can keep you from dying. I think that we're much more closer to a therapy and preventing people from dying from COVID-19. That's probably going to happen in the next 6 months. You'll get it. You'll feel really crappy. You'll go to your doctor's office. He'll give you a 5-minute test. He'll say, yeah, you have it. He'll write you a prescription. You'll go to CVS or Walgreens. You'll get the prescription. You'll feel bad for a day or two, but you won't die. That's what's going to happen, and that's what's going to return society to normal, because that's what we do. We keep you from dying from disease.
Yeah, I think that's I think people would sign up for that trade-off.
That's right. But that's what's going to happen. It isn't going to be, we're going to keep you from ever getting it. And by the way, I want to tell people who are not scientists that it is a very rare occasion that a virus jumps from an animal to a human. But far rarer is that if that virus jumps from an animal to a human, that a human can now infect another human without an animal intermediary. That almost never happens. And thank goodness, because that's how our species wouldn't be around if that were the case. Our immune systems are phenomenal. So this is a rare occurrence. It doesn't happen a lot that we get a virus that jumps the food chain like that. And it does not happen that we can contaminate each other. So
well, that's good that you cleared that up, because there are articles probably based off of clickbait that are saying, oh, there's another pandemic like disease that pigs have now, or something, that if it jumps to people. So
well, if it jumps to one human, that's one thing, but human to human transmission is very, very rare. That's why we don't have these outbreaks all the time.
If where would you say, if people want to learn about things that you have researched, put out before, or just learn about future adaptation? Am I saying it right?
Yes,
Okay.
sure. They can pick up my books on Amazon, which are The Watchman's Rattle. That would be the first book to read. And then the second one is On the Verge. And they can go to my website, which is RebeccaCosta.com. That's RebeccaCosta.com. And they can see videos and other interviews and see book reviews. The books have been endorsed by, everybody from, Richard Branson to, I don't know, many members of the Senate. They know I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. really rattling their cage, and I'll continue to do that.
But you've had endorsement from both parties.
Yeah, both parties aren't doing
Okay.
the job.
Okay, because
We all know it. We all know it. We know it. The question is what to do about it.
Great. I really this was very interesting, and I'm glad you're very passionate about this. And yeah, I think it was a great discussion, a great starting point for people. I hope you feel that way too. If you're wanting to learn more about trends, how technology could be used both good and for bad, because advancements are neutral. It's people that aren't. So you said earlier we have a mankind problem or a human problem, not a technology problem about something. I got to go back and listen to it and get that exact line, because that was a very, whatever it was a good observance.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation today. I think it was an important one.
Thank you for coming on and agreeing to do this.